Welcome back to Law and Crime. Before we get back into court, I want to talk to you about a recent development in the case against Massachusetts woman Karen Reed. The family of late Boston police officer John O'Keefe filed a lawsuit today against the defendant and two Canton bars involved in the timeline of this case. Remember, a mistrial was declared in the murder case last month after a jury was hung on whether Reed was guilty of murdering O'Keefe in January of 2021. Prosecutors believe Reed hit O'Keefe with her SUV and left him to die in the snow. Her retrial on the charges of second-degree murder, manslaughter, and leaving the scene of an accident with injury or death is scheduled for January of 2025. Now, according to the recent lawsuit, the victim's family believes Reed, quote, intended the reckless conduct that resulted in John O'Keefe's injuries/death, and accuses the bars in question of, quote, negligently serving alcohol to an intoxicated person. The O'Keefes are also suing Reed for inflicting emotional distress on the victim's niece, who was 14 at the time of O'Keefe's death, by suddenly waking her up and sharing the traumatic news of her uncle's passing. O'Keefe's family said in the lawsuit that Reed's conduct was, quote, extreme and outrageous, beyond the bounds of decency, and was utterly intolerable. Here are my thoughts. It makes sense. You know what? When you have a case that has criminal liability, a family is also left without a brother, a father figure, a loved one, a son. And so to seek not only some justice from the person you believe committed the crime, but also it makes sense in some regards to the people who overserved Karen Reed. And that could be a very easy hurdle for them based on the video surveillance as well as the toxicology afterwards. And if they can connect that intoxication to any form of death or murder, especially, that could mean a big payout. That would pay for a lot of things that the family would need in burying an individual, or also taking care of the individuals who John O'Keefe may have been taking care of while he was alive. Well, we'll keep you up to date in the case of Karen Reed as soon as new developments come in. But in the meantime, we're continuing our coverage in Las Vegas, Nevada, where closing arguments are underway in the trial of defendant Robert Tellis. If you're new to the case, let me give you a little catch-up. Tellis is a former Clark County public administrator accused of killing Jeff Gehrman, a longtime investigative reporter for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. And before Gehrman's death, he wrote several articles about Tellis's alleged hostile work environment and an affair that he admitted to on the stand in this case with a staff member. And during that time frame, Tellis lost his primary bid for re-election. On Labor Day weekend of 2022, surveillance video allegedly shows Tellis posing as a landscaper to approach Gehrman's property, stabbing him to death on his lawn, but Tellis denies killing Gehrman and testified to the jury that he was framed by Compass Realty. He believes the firm killed Gehrman in an attempt to distract people from the alleged corruption that Tellis was cracking down on. The defendant faces up to life in prison if convicted on the charges of murder with a deadly weapon of a person aged 60 or older. Now, both sides have rested their case on Friday after a brief rebuttal and surrebuttal, which is a rebuttal for the defense, that mostly surrounded digital forensic evidence. The prosecution and defense have already delivered their closing arguments, or at least initial closing argument for the prosecution. So now the prosecution is back up giving their rebuttal closing. Let's jump into court to listen to more.
With Steve Wolfson, like the DA, it culminated with him. He can't quite link it up, but he threw that name out there. And here's the thing that struck me when I took over this case. I would submit to most people, probably before ever hearing about this case, had no idea what a public administrator was. He is not a U.S. senator. He is not a governor. He is not a congressperson. He is a duly elected official who manages an office of approximately 8 people. And their job is to assist people who pass away, who don't leave a will and leave property behind. The public administrator's office is not at the forefront of everyone's mind in this community. No one learns about this until who brings the office to light? Jeff Gehrman. And what's amazing is if you believe that story about this conspiracy, all of these people and all of these entities were willing to sacrifice their reputation, their business, their police department, even the public administrator's office. They're all willing to put it on the line to kill a reporter, to get that guy, even though he's leaving in 3 months? Does that make a shred of sense? Absolutely not. But what it does give you a window into is what's in his mind. That is how important Mr. Tellis views himself. That every single one of these people, every single one of these entities were literally willing to kill another human being who is not him just to frame him. Does that make sense? And more importantly, where is the evidence to support that? Where is the evidence that you received in this trial that supports that? And the answer is you didn't. There isn't any evidence of that. Why would Compass conspire to frame him? Why? I asked him. I wanted to know. He couldn't give a good answer. His best answer was, well, I was going to do a lot of work in the next 3 weeks or next 3 months. Has anyone ever heard of any sort of legal filings, lawsuits getting settled up in a brief, tidy 3 months? That's not a thing. That didn't happen. That doesn't happen. There was no need to frame him because they already succeeded getting him voted out of office. And all they had to do was donate a whopping, I guess, 15 grand at best to get him out of office. They didn't need to kill him. He was on his way out the door. He is a lame duck. And lame ducks don't matter. What incentive does Metro have in this conspiracy with a real estate company to frame a lame duck? That's an even bigger one. Why would they do that? What did we hear that would show us that Compass is like, hey, guess what? Hey, Metro Homicide, we need you to join us to go frame this outgoing politician. I mean, we killed the reporter. That's not important. But I want you to join us in this, and let's go frame this guy. And all of Metro's like, sign me up. Sounds great. Does that make any sense? Absolutely not. It makes no sense. And it's not supported by the evidence. And again, if Compass is literally willing to kill, why not just kill him? Just kill him. Why does Jeff have to suffer? It makes no sense. And it gets even worse. Well, before we get to that, here's the thing. When we go back, when you think about the Compass question, right? Isn't Compass in cahoots with Rita Reid and Alicia Goodwin, right? They're funding Alicia Goodwin, right? Or no, Rita Reid. They're funding her campaign against him. And who do they get to help write the story? Jeff Gehrman. Like, why would they kill the guy who wrote the stories that got this guy out of office? Why would Compass do that? That doesn't make sense. And then, yeah, if it's really a frame job, the murder weapon should have been in the house. The orange shirt should have been in the house. The DNA should have been all over the place. Like, they're claiming, you know, well, why weren't these things located? The state would submit to you, he got rid of them. He got rid of the murder weapon in the orange shirt. He cleaned the outside of his Yukon. He even admitted it. And here's the thing. We only know that he wiped down his Yukon because on that one particular day, he was being watched. He wasn't watched every single day after the murder by Metro. Did you hear that testimony? There were other days he could have wiped the interior of his car if he wished. And I've always thought about the shoes. Like, the shoes to me was kind of an interesting one. My co-counsel's right. Like, the only one who benefits of like chopping up the shoes is Mr. Tellis. It's this awkward, amateurish way of getting kind of rid of the evidence. But I thought to myself, maybe Mr. Tellis didn't even think to like bring an extra pair of shoes. Because like, what happens if he walks in and he's totally barefoot? His wife would be like, why do you have no shoes on? He probably had to bring his shoes back in. He doesn't need the orange shirt. He doesn't need the murder weapon. It is his kid's bag, right? I mean, he said those were that's my kid's sports bag. So like, you probably need to bring that back. Not sure what he was doing with the hat, I'll admit. But clearly he's chopping it up to try to get rid of it, just like his shoes. And why kill Jeff? Like, this is the question that is so destructive to this defense. It's his writing that shines a light on his behavior. He is sought out by the co-conspirators to do this. And he admits, and he admitted on the stand, one of the rare times he admits it, he admitted, yeah, his writing was the difference in the election. That's why I lost. I got that out of him. He was at least willing to concede that. But for Jeff Gehrman, he's still a public administrator. His writing is why the defendant is out of the job. And therefore, under this theory, he's got to be the one who's killed. That's his reward. He's collateral damage. Like, really? Rita and Alicia are like, sorry, Jeff, you got to go. It's been really nice. Thanks for the help, but you're out now. We got to clean up loose. I mean, is that really what's being suggested here? And the answer is that is what he's suggesting. But it defies common sense, and it's not supported by the evidence. And here's the other thing. Jeff's putting together a fifth article. And now what we can tell from the records, it's just about Roberta and him. It's the salacious stuff. So who in this realm, if you think about everyone in the conspiracy, and you think about Mr. Tellis, who is the one that wouldn't want another article written about him engaging in an affair? You think Derek Jappy cares? Cliff Mogg? Adam Fenn? No, it's him. He's the only one that would have a stake in making sure that article never got written. No one in the conspiracy would want to prevent that coming out, especially not the Rita Reeds and the Alicia Goodwins. If they want that exposed, I mean, they went to have that exposed. They wouldn't want that being not put out. And I'm sure Compass Realty wouldn't either. I'm sure they would have wanted him discredited. Like, another article would, in theory, be great. They wouldn't have killed him. And then we have his walk. Like, he's got a little hitch in his getup where he kind of leans to this one side. You can kind of see it. There's something that is about his little walk. And look, you don't have to take my word for it. You can evaluate whether you think what Zach and Christy had to say about it. They've hung out with him. They've walked with him. They thought, and think about how they saw it. They were like, man, they kind of knew the background between Gehrman and Tellis, and they were like, wouldn't that be funny if that was him? He's got those same goofy gray shoes. Like, that was the thing. Like, they noticed the shoes, which I think is really interesting, you know? But they don't act on it at first. But it's only when they see the Yukon that they kind of flip out and they're like, well, we probably should call on this. The only other person who came and said that wasn't him is Nicole. And listen, you'll have all of Nicole's texts. The state would submit to you that, look, there's no doubt she has a kinship to Mr. Tellis. You can see it in the text messages. You can see it. You can go read through them. The state would submit she has a bias. And, like, she cares about him. And I think he was probably good to her in the office, which is understandable. But, look, you can judge it on your own. You can judge the testimony of those other people. You can make that call for yourself. But I would submit to you, when you look at this, think about all the other evidence in the case. Think about all the other evidence, the motive, the physical things found in his house, his DNA underneath the nails. When looking at this and being like, is that him? And the state would submit to you, when you put all that together and you watch this video, absolutely, it's him. Professional killer versus amateur killer. Mr. Tellis would like you to believe that this was an assassin with combat training. The state would submit to you, you don't need combat training to stab people. You don't have to go to knife school. You don't have to do that. If you're angry enough, you can stab people pretty good. If you got enough hate in your heart, you can really go at people. And I would submit to you, the state would submit to you, that Mr. Tellis had had enough of being exposed, written about, publicized, embarrassed, and he wasn't going to have it done again. Because at this point, the state would submit, Gehrman had taken everything from him. Everything. Everything that he worked for. He worked his way up through law school. He got himself elected, and this guy took it all from him. And so he wanted to take something from Jeff, and that was his life. Professional assassins don't use their personal vehicles. They don't use their personal phones or work computers to conduct reconnaissance. They don't wear attention-grabbing outfits. They don't flee the scene and then double back to pull right.
We're continuing to listen to the prosecution's rebuttal closing argument in the case against defendant Robert Tellis. And a lot of this rebuttal is kind of just poking the holes in Robert Tellis' own defense. And this is why I think from very early on in this trial, I was saying, don't testify. This is where people's egos get themselves in trouble. Now, was there a mountain full of evidence against him before he took the stand? Absolutely. But putting forward this idea that there's a conspiracy theory that someone else caused the murder of Robert Gehrman, where the evidence to suggest that was so flimsy, I think only makes it that much harder of a case for Robert Tellis. This, from the get-go, should have been nothing but prosecution can't prove their burden. There's evidence that the investigators never looked at. There's holes in the case here. But putting forward another story that is as weak, flimsy, and ridiculous as this was only gives the prosecution that much more ammunition to push back on the defense.